I grew up in a racing stable. My dad was a steeplechase jockey. Apprenticed at Cripps for 3 years and Cox for 4 years in Melbourne. The Cox plate is named after one of his bosses, and he was the stable rider. And after a while, he's quite a famous personality. And I used to ride steeplechase horses for him when I was 10 years of age at Randwick in New South Wales. And they were big log fences. And other trainers used to say, "Fred, you'll get that boy killed yet." "No, I won't," he'd say. "He does what I tell him and rides like I showed him. He won't get killed." And rode a saddle horse to Queensland. 717 miles to the first station.
Jim travelled Queensland for 21 years, continually horse-breaking and taming. He's broken in 7,000 horses and re-educated many hundreds of spoiled horses, trotters, pacers, saddle horses, race horses, horses of all sorts. Jim Wilton travelled for some years with his Wonder Horse team around the agricultural shows in all states of Australia, with the exception of Western Australia, also both islands of New Zealand. It's easy to see why Jim Wilton is billed as Australia's greatest master horseman. His knowledge and understanding of the equine puts him in a league of his own.
I lived for. The thrill of training champion horses. I'd had enough of race horses. I trained a lot of them. I helped Dad train them. The ordinary hacks, I just wanted to make them better than ordinary. And that's why I started training the team. But, I taught horses to carry people in their teeth and to walk on their knees with a rider on their back, fall in and fall out when the name was called. I give exhibitions of them all over Australia. And everybody said they're the cleverest team of horses in the world. They earned me a lot of money, I know. I running a riding school in Sydney at Waitara, and Kathleen was one of the riders. So I got her, and she travelled to Australia with me, and she's still with me. And she's very sick now. I'm going to let her come down to the hospital down here in Sydney. The most difficult thing I've taught a horse to do was to carry Kathleen in his teeth. And he'd carry her 200 yards. She weighed 118 pounds. She weighed 115 pounds. And the sling she was sitting in weighed 3 pounds. And she'd sit on it and put her leg out. And when he'd carried her, we got tired, he'd slowly put her down to the ground. That was the mightiest act ever done by a horse in the world. No one's ever taught it before or since, or any horse to do it.
Before starting to break in a horse, remind yourself of the fact that he is naturally afraid of you. And it is this inherent fear of man that you have to overcome. So catching must be quickly and quietly done. For this demonstration, we've chosen a 3-year-old colt. First day, catching and gaining the horse's confidence. To catch the colt, a light lasso is used. Move him around anti-clockwise and catch him around the neck. Then turn him back to going clockwise so that he'll be traveling right for the throwing of the half hitch onto the nose. Immediately the half hitch is on, he's as good as caught. A slight tightening of it pulls him up instantly, which is most important. The quicker you can stop him, the clearer he can think. Relax all pressure on the nose and stand away while holding his eyes with your own. Remember, he has an inherent fear of you. So, to let him know you mean no harm, hold the rope in the left hand and approach him very quietly and slowly, keeping to one side in case he strikes, and not taking your eyes from him. When close, slowly put out the back of your hand for him to smell, still holding him with your eyes. The next step is to gently slide your little finger up the side of his face, and with firm pressure, close his eye. After closing his eye 2 or 3 times, step back clear away from him and let him think about it. Again, start the approach by moving from side to side, reassuring the colt that you're not going to rush in and hurt him. Remember, he's like a little child just starting school, very nervous and very much afraid, and you are the teacher. You have the power to allay those fears or create more, and it's your actions he'll react to. After getting as far as rubbing behind the near ear, work the rope loose from under his throat and remove the hitch from the nose. As the rope passes above his eyes, he will immediately duck his head and be free. So ends the first lesson.
I've always caught my horses with a rope. It's the fastest, most efficient system in the world, and it's the safest. I'd draft catch and let go 10 wild horses in every 30 minutes. Well, you've got to look at the horse's eyes when you catch him. Don't take your eyes off his. No matter what he's doing or what you're doing. Just watch his eyes. When if you take your eyes off him, he'd have to do anything. But you hold his brain with your eyes and keep him still.
Second day, tackling and first day of mouthing. The second day, the colt is roped and the hitch thrown on the nose. This time, Ian used his left hand as the horse was moving anti-clockwise. The second lesson involves bridling, tackling, and the first stage of mouthing. Ian repeats the first lesson. Eye contact is most important, as he knows your brain is behind your eyes. Please remember, the same applies to him, and it's his brain you're working on all through the breaking in. Again, Ian stands away, reassuring the colt that he is in no danger. When the horse is relaxed, slip the nose hitch up to a position across the forehead and make another across the nose. Now we introduce the blindfold, which is 30 inches square and made of black Italian cloth, folded 3 corner ways. After rubbing his eye with it, the blindfold goes over the near eye and is kept in place by 2 hitches. The horse will not know anything about using his feet if the eye on the side you're working is covered. He has 2 independent brain cells that are evidently not connected across the center. A wild, unbroken horse can look back at you with his uncovered eye and will give a slight start and remain motionless because the off eye will not tell him what to do about something on the near side, and vice versa. You exclude all light from the eye you're working on and proceed with what you want to do in a quiet and gentle manner. But not slowly, work smartly, and you'll be quite safe. Run the hand down from the neck and start on his near leg with the fingers of the right hand barely touching him, keeping a slight pressure on the rope and your left shoulder resting against his. Quickly run the fingers down the shins, the backs of the fingers and hand being the most soothing to the touchy horse. When both legs are accustomed to the touch, we introduce the hobbles, putting the strap on the off leg first above the fetlock. If the near leg is hobbled first, you risk being hit in the face with the chain if the horse snaps his leg up. When both legs are hobbled, step away and draw the blindfold off, walking a little to the rear to send the horse forward. Finding his feet under control, he might argue a minute with the hobbles, but if you don't drive him, he will soon be content to stand there and have a look at you. He's now ready for the mouthing bridle. Replace the blindfold by tucking it under the top and bottom hitches. The bit used is a player bit. The players on the bit make the horse bob his head, therefore teaching him to come off the pressure of the bit. Extensions of plastic tubing are made to fit the sides of the bit. This prevents the side of the bit from digging into the horse's nose during the mouthing. Replace the blindfold by tucking it in under the top and bottom hitches. Place the bridle over the ears first, then do up the throat strap under the rope. The bridle must be lengthened out, much too large. Press the bottom lip with the finger and thumb, and once the bit is in, take up the cheek straps until the bit is in the proper place. A little loose, but above the teeth. The two hitches are then taken off through the mouth, and the hitch is replaced on the nose over the bridle. The blindfold is again adjusted over the near eye. Keep your left hand on the horse's neck while the right hand gently rubs over the back and under the belly. Then, keeping the rope over your left arm, run your hands back along his body from neck to hip, using your right hand to lift his tail straight up, firmly but gently holding the dock, not by catching the hair only. Now is the time to introduce the mouthing roller and crupper. Gently slide on the roller and test the horse for touchiness by applying a little pressure several times on the girth before doing it up loosely. Undo the hobbles, leaving them around the pasterns. The girth is then adjusted firmly. The crupper must be kept short at this stage for fear of the horse getting a hind leg through it. Remove the rope, taking the blindfold off with the left hand. After you see how he takes the roller, re-rope him and blindfold the near eye. Now put the crupper on. If the horse moves around too much, the hobbles may be applied again. It is important not to catch any hairs under the crupper, as this will really make the horse buck. So the left hand is used to free any short hairs. The crupper is lengthened out so the tail can be passed through it. It is then readjusted to the proper length. As you can see here, having the rope over the left arm is important. Once the crupper is adjusted, remove the rope and blindfold and leave the horse on his own for half an hour or so to think about it. There are many different ways of mouthing horses, good, bad, and indifferent. Some are dangerous to the colt, others injurious and ineffective. The usual method is to use a pulley in front of the saddle with the running cord from the off side to the near side of the bit, and keeping the colt reined up for some hours with varying degrees of tightness, finishing off later in long driving reins. This method has some good points in the first half, but only amateurs drive with long reins, as the horse can put his head where he likes and thereby acquire bad habits. Also, many accidents are caused through the horse taking fright at the reins passing his rump. The colt has been tackled and left to think about it. Rope him and apply the blindfold. Tie the rein to the end of the lasso, then pass the clip through the roller ring under the rope and clip it onto the bit. The rope is then removed from the nose and neck, leaving you with one long rein on one side of the colt. Now step away from him and throw the rope over his head and apply a gentle pressure from behind the roller, but do not drag his head around by force. If the pressure of about 10 pounds is put on one rein and not increased, he will soon give his head to it and the rein will become slack. Allow it to remain, so he will soon straighten up and tighten it again. He might fight a little, but will soon give in to the unyielding pressure on his jaw and turn his head to you. Thus, he learns a counter to the pressure of the bit. To make the colt put his head right into his shoulder, we apply a double purchase by placing the rein through the D in the roller, up through the ring bit, and back to the roller. This helps in enabling you to get the horse's head right in before he turns. Your right arm can assist the horse, while the left hand takes in the rein. On a quieter horse, you can push on their shoulder to help them turn. After a few turns, give the horse time to think it over. When he is giving in to one side, apply the same method to the other side until he will give in to the rein on either side. He has now had his first lesson in mouthing. This usually takes 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes less. And when it's over, untackle him and let him out. He's got to think about it.
Well, I was taught to use long reins, drive them in long reins when I was a boy. And the first job I got in Queensland, the horses were too wild, you couldn't. They'd kick the reins and they attached their thighs and kick the fence and cripple themselves. So I let them go and went and laid down and thought about it. I said, there'd have to be an easier way than that to do it. And that's when I come up with this one-rein mouthing. And it's highly efficient. It's the only way to mouth a horse. You mouth him quick and lively with no fuss and no trouble. I broke driving a horse in long reins around the buildings, breaking him in. I said, you're wasting your time doing that, fella. Who says, he says. I said, I say. 55 years, but oh, you would know, wouldn't you? Well, yeah, he said. Yes, I know, 55 years, but... So anyhow, 3 minutes later, I seen him going out the gate, dragging the reins, and the bloke after him in a motor car. A semi-trailer ran up the meridian strip to miss him, and the motor car ran up on the footpath the other side to miss him, and down the road opposite the Bankstown Trottentrack gate he went, flat to the boards, full gallop with the reins behind him. I wondered if he thought I might have had a clue. Oh, you'd know, wouldn't you? You can't tell him.
The third day, mouthing continued. On the third day, the throwing of the hitch may not be necessary, as the horse gains more confidence in the handler every day. The third day starts as a repeat of the second day. At this stage, the hand can be used to stop the horse's line of sight instead of the blindfold while attaching the rein. The idea here is that you put a halt on him, he finds a counter for it by turning, and when the rope is thrown over him, he has released himself. You're training the brain through the medium of the mouth, and great care must be taken to avoid excessive pressure of the bit. Otherwise, you will kill the nerves or the feeling of the jaw, and the result will be a hard-mouthed horse. So, unyielding but gentle hands, please. The next lesson is carriage. This is arrived at through the medium of the bearing reins, commencing after the short side reining lesson. The reins should be tied in a single bow with the end hanging down about 2 feet, which makes it a quick and simple matter to release him by just giving the ends a pull. As we need both hands to tie the bow, the blindfold is necessary, covering only the side we're working on. The bearing reins should be reasonably slack when first put on, because now we have come to the dangerous part of mouthing. Many a horse's neck has been broken because of the bearing reins being used before side reining, and through reining his head back too tightly before he had learned to submit to the bit. For the first time on, the bearing reins must be slack enough to allow the colt almost complete freedom of head movement. Both reins must also be even. After a short rest, remove the bearing reins and side rein him a little more on each side. Then rein him a little tighter with the bearing reins and leave him alone again. He will walk about and arch his neck enough to give him a good carriage. Mouthing the bit, but putting no weight on it, he becomes ready for the final day of mouthing. After a short time, untackle him and let him go.
Don't work on him too long. Let him have a break for a while. If it's only a few minutes, the next day will be much better for it. I said to the chap driving this trotter out, walking behind the gig, listen, I said, get in it, boy. If he goes, you'll go with him. You can stop him and pull him round. And he said, oh, give me a dirty grunt, and they drove him out onto the track, and just before he got to the track, he rushed the gateway and wheeled around the gate post with the and smashed the gig up, and he full gallop around the track, flat to the boards 3 times, and they couldn't block him. I wondered if he thought, oh, I might have had a clue about that. It cost him the price of a new gig, and he spoiled his horse, because he wouldn't get in the gig and hang on to him. If you're standing up behind the gig, he'd pull you head over heels and go for his life. I've cured more spoiled horses than I ever saw.
4th day, final day of mouthing, leading on horseback and riding. On the 4th day, the colt has his last short lesson of side reining. As you can see here, there's a great improvement from the 1st day. After a short lesson with bearing reins, he's ready for the final stage of mouthing. The long reins are not used to drive him. They're resorted to for the purpose of teaching him to back, as no horse can be considered mouthed or safe to ride if he cannot be backed with one hand from the saddle. For this lesson, and this alone, the long reins come into use. To hold him, you can wrap both reins around the fence. He will try and move forward, which will bring him into contact with the bit. If you don't give, he will step back or stop. By maintaining a slight pressure and not increasing it, he will soon step back, thereby teaching himself to back up. About 3 lessons with the long reins, and he will back up anywhere with the pressure of one hand. Once he is backing up, he is ready for the next lesson, which is important in that it accomplishes 2 things at once: leading on horseback and preparing to be mounted. The colt is blindfolded and the roller taken off. Produce a quiet saddle horse, and don't take the blindfold off the colt until you're mounted. Put the colt's lead under and around the neck of the lead horse. Move around the yard together and lean over him, rubbing his back, rump, neck, and withers. Accustom him to you being above his eyes, over him, and touching him. You're preparing him for riding and teaching him to lead on horseback at the same time. Gentle taps with the whip are used to move the colt forward. 3 or 4 minutes are enough for the first lesson. So when he's going around the yard all right, dismount and blindfold one eye, then hobble him. Now we come to the riding of him. When the colt is saddled up nice and firmly, undo the hobbles and take up the girth a little tighter, but not excessively. Then remove the blindfold. After a short period, catch him and blindfold the near eye again. After rechecking the girth, rein up and swing aboard. Then remove the blindfold. On removal of the cloth, you might find yourself having a lively ride, but it's only a very exceptional horse that will do much if he has been handled according to instructions. Do not give him any encouragement to buck, or for that matter, do anything that you don't want him to carry on with, as the horse is an animal of habit, and if you let him learn a bad habit, he'll want to retain it. Keep him moving forward. Gently ride him around the yard, turn him near side and off a couple of times, pull him up and ask him to back a couple of steps. To get off him, hold the reins with your right hand and reach forward with your left hand, catching the ring in the headpiece of the bridle to block the colt's line of sight. Then swing off, stepping out in front. So ends the fourth day. Blindfold him, unsaddle him, then let him go.
Well, why he is a small yard is to keep close contact with your horse, and it's very easy to lasso. No obstructions in it. A round yard, perfectly round, should be 23 feet to 25 feet across it. No bigger. Before you get on him, you want to lead him on horseback and let him see you above his eyes and the movements above his eyes, and then he don't take much notice of it when you do ride him. He won't buck. Very seldom. You ever get one little buck when you lead him on horseback first.
Fifth day, leading on horseback and riding. On the fifth day, the first lesson is more leading in the round yard, then out into the other yards. At this stage, a blindfold is still used when mounting. If the youngster swings his rump away from you, a few complete turns will bring him in alongside. No fuss and no excitement. There's a simple counter for everything he does wrong. If the colt is insistent on swinging his rump away from you when being led on horseback, you can give him more leading on the fence. After leading in the round yard, open the gate and lead him from one yard to another. There must be no struggling on the part either of the colt or yourself at any stage of the breaking in. On completion of the second day's leading in the yard, the colt is saddled up for his second mounting. The rider of the colt must be perfectly balanced. The horse is awkward and does not know how to go with the unaccustomed weight, much less with that of an unbalanced rider. If you adopt the show seat, you will throw away your power over the horse by carrying the feet a little too far back. Your body will tip forward off the perpendicular at the slightest unasked for move of the colt.
Now?
This is about the riding of the lively, untrained horse. And if you squeeze him up with your legs and sit still, he will get panicky and try to buck or bolt. So move about quite freely and ride him loose. After riding him in the round yard, open the gate and ride him from one yard to another. On his second riding, you will do well to ride him in and out of all the yards for about 10 minutes. But ride him smartly. Walk and trot, but don't canter him. Several times in that 10 minutes, pull him up and ask him to back up. After this lesson, unsaddle and let him go.
When you're handling horses, remember they're flesh and blood with bones and feeling just the same as we have. So handle them very gently.
Sixth day, leading out on horseback, riding out and leading on foot. On the sixth day, lead on horseback as before. This time the colt is led out around obstacles and buildings. This will have a tendency to make him stay close to the lead horse and you for protection, and at the same time help to overcome his natural fear of things. The lead horse must be professional at the job, enabling you to move in and alongside the colt and stop or back up when necessary. If you let the colt get in front of the lead horse, it might upset the lead horse and cause a struggle between the two.
Dangerous. It is the best way in the world to lay the colt. It's possible to get away from him, the couple from the end of it. But you want to put...
Here, Ian demonstrates what can happen if you try mounting without the blindfold. So at this stage, the blindfold is still necessary. Ride him out over the same course over which he was previously led. Because he was led over the course first, you will find that he is more confident when ridden. Do not turn him for the bush or away from the yards, except around the obstacles and buildings where he might still be slightly unwilling to go, as he is now on his own. The advantage in this is that he will be so interested in everything about him that he will not think of bucking or trying to bolt. For instance, if you take him down the paddock half a mile, he'll be anxious to get there. You'll have to hold him back, which means pressure on his jaw. And then when you turn him around to come home again, he may not want to. And many will buck really hard, bolt or bail up and sulk. And you will find that you have a fight on your hands, which is bad for the habits of the horse. He might win, and even if he doesn't, he has tired himself out, knocked his mouth about in trying, and made himself horribly sulky in his defeat. At the same time, he has found that he can be a source of annoyance to you, which is something he should never be allowed to know. Whereas, had you not taken him there, he would not have wanted to do anything other than what he had been taught to do. And when you take him, say, 3 or 4 days later, it will have become a habit to go along properly and do the right thing. So, the first outside ride is over, and you're back in the round yard. Unsaddle, but leave the bridle on, because he has to learn more. That is, leading on foot. The off-rein is brought through the near ring of the bit. Keeping eye contact with his near eye, the whip handle can be used to tap him on the side to move him around the yard against the fence. Swapping the reins to the right hand and the whip to the left, take the single off-rein from under his jaw, as well as the two reins you have from outside the near bit ring. This will give you a good solid handhold under the jaw between both bit rings, using your forearm to pull him in or push him off. If he doesn't walk along smartly, the whip is used behind by lightly flicking his hocks, cannons or thigh. Trail the whip and go with him. After this short lesson, swap the reins back to the left hand and the whip to the right, and stand out in front of him to lead. The whip is not used as an instrument of torture, nor is it to be used as an implement of fear. It's used only to teach obedience and respect. A few short lessons lasting 3 or 4 minutes, and he has had his first leading lesson on foot. So let him go for the day.
Don't hit him too hard, you don't just flip him, little light flips with the whip. And hold him short. Shoot right at the jaw, and little light flips with the stock whip. Always whip break your horses. And that's the way to do it. You can lead anywhere, up steps, down steps, in houses, anywhere at all. They'll follow you with a whip if they're taught to lead with a whip. They'll go anywhere. Look, I say, if you build a ramp up to your house, I'll put him on the roof or stand him on the chimney for you. Or put him on the roof of your float.
7th day, leading on horseback, riding, collar roping, leg handling, and leading on foot. On the 7th day, the colt goes over the 6th day's work, only he is led a little further, and in consequence of the fact that he is rapidly becoming more tractable, gets his work done much faster. As his lessons progress, he will become smarter, both mentally and physically. Everything that moves about him has a domesticating influence, wearing away the wildness that is inherent in the horse. Perhaps here would be a good place to tell you that young horses, and many old ones, are more afraid of stationary objects than they are of moving ones. The reason being that horses have a fear of the hereafter, and stationary objects savor of the dead. After riding out, unsaddle and leave the blindfold on, because we introduce a new lesson: collar roping and leg handling. If the yard is hard, do not put hobbles on the front feet whilst collar roping. If a horse struggles, he can throw himself through not being able to spread his front legs far enough to support himself whilst a hind leg is off the ground. If the yard is soft, it doesn't matter, as it will teach him to stand still when his hind foot is picked up. After the collar is put on, a leather strap is put on the leg you're going to handle. This strap protects the horse against rope burn or any chafing of the skin. In another lesson, Ian will demonstrate collar roping using a rope instead of a leather collar strap. Both are acceptable. The reason for handling his legs and feet is to acquaint him with the actions of shoeing, also to ensure his docility in every way. The feet being his main weapon of defense and attack, and the appendages with which he can cause great trouble, great care must be taken in the scientific handling of the legs and feet. After handling the near hind leg and foot, do the same with the other side. At this stage, he must not see you put the collar rope on. If he does, he will promptly learn to kick it away and will be a kicker all his life, or at least always have that inclination. The same applies if you try handling his feet without the rope. He will perhaps struggle or kick before he has time to learn not to, and the damage is done. He gets his leg away and thereby learns his own strength. Whereas, if he has had that first struggle on a rope that is attached to him, he finds he is only fighting himself, so quickly gives it up. After leg handling, give him a short lesson of leading on foot. Always look at his eyes before using the whip. Do it deliberately, and tell him with your eyes that you're going to use the whip. After this short lesson, his day's work is over, so let him go.
I was talking about a collar rope. It's to convince a horse there's no good at resisting it. If it's put behind the arms, between the arms, he cannot hurt himself. But if it's put outside the arm, he can break his stifle. He pulls his neck around, lifts his hind leg, and the stifle only works backwards and forwards, not like that sideways. And when you pick a horse's hind foot up, just pull it straight out behind him. Don't try to take it out sideways, because you can't do it, you know. He'll resist him. He don't want you to break his stifle.
8th day, catching lesson with whip, horseback leading, collar roping, leg handling, first saddling lesson without blindfold, mounting lesson and riding, leading on foot. On the 8th day, the lasso is dispensed with, and from now on, he is caught with the whip. If he doesn't face you, a light flick with the whip about the hocks, and he soon will. We start the day with more horseback leading. After this lesson, the colt has his second lesson in collar roping. This time, Ian demonstrates the use of a rope instead of a leather collar strap. The left hand is used to pull the rope up, while the right hand tightens it. After handling both hind feet, he is ready for his first lesson in saddling without the blindfold. For this lesson, the collar rope and hobbles are left on to ensure he doesn't move about too much. Let him have a smell of the saddle, then slide it on. Do up the girth firmly, but not too tight. Remove the collar rope, then tighten the girth. It's pretty obvious that the colt isn't going to stand still while Ian mounts. So in this situation, the collar rope is used again. This method is very effective in keeping the horse still while you mount. One good lesson like this is usually enough, and it's not long before the horse will accept you mounting without the blindfold. When he's ready for his riding lesson, take him straight out in the open. Riding from yard to yard is no longer necessary. If at any time he bucks or puts on any little rowdy show while you're on him, never hit him for it. Just stop him as soon as you can. If, for example, he was cantering when he started playing up, continue cantering when he stops. Don't let him think it inconvenienced you in any way. If you thrash him for it, he will hate you, especially if he has any good breeding, so never antagonize him. And it'll not be long before he'll be looking to you for the many little kindnesses you can show him. It is then he becomes a thing of joy. On coming back to the yard, he is unsaddled and given his last lesson of the day, which is more leading on foot. After this, let him go. That is his greatest reward.
When you're putting hobbles on the horse or doing something with his legs, you will stand in close to him. And there's certain ways of touching the leg, and keep your hand on it, and keep in close to him with the body. Well, if you're too frightened to do that, don't bother handling horses. You've got to keep in contact with them whenever you're leaning on them or touching them with your hands. Got your hand on them, pushing them a little bit. They won't be near so touchy. Just keep contact with the horse.
9th day, repetition of the 8th day, only with change of direction. We start the 9th day by leading on horseback, but this time we go further afield in a direction opposite to that of the buildings. If there's a little bit of timber or scrub about, take him into that, as he has to get used to being led and ridden in all types of country. Today is the second lesson in mounting without a blindfold, and the only restraint Ian uses today is back hobbles. As you can see, the colt has learned his lesson from the previous day and is quite happy to stand still. The breaker will find that he can do all these extra things and lead and ride the extra distances as the colt becomes more tractable each day, taking less time over each lesson in the yard, thus leaving more time for his work outside. After riding out, the colt has another lesson in leg handling. This time, after the normal procedure, the rope is taken off the foot and the leg is extended out behind, the breaker going through the same movements as the farrier. Some horses will resist when the hind leg is drawn out behind. The answer to this move is the leg rope, but this can't be done until the colt has had a tie-up lesson. So the leg rope will be demonstrated later in the piece. After handling both hind legs, the front feet are handled, still leaving the hobbles on for the first lesson. So ends the 9th day of breaking in.
A horse is a creature of habit. He learns to do everything in routine, such as leading, tying up, giving up his feet, without resistance. It takes 14 days to make a horse in, and you can't guarantee him at doing it any quicker. That's a wild horse. You get a quiet one born about the city, you might do him a little bit sooner, but you won't do a wild one.
10th day, repetition of the 9th day, and last day of horseback leading, much to the relief of the lead horse. 11th day, repetition of previous day's work, whip breaking taking the place of horseback leading. The 11th day is a repeat of the previous day, only whip breaking takes the place of horseback leading. You must be able to hold the end of his bridle reins in the left hand and crack a stock whip all around him while he stands and takes no notice. Swish the whip around high in the air above his head to start. When he's used to it, crack the whip, taking care not to touch him with it. When you can hold the end of the reins and crack the whip around him without him pulling away, you can be sure of holding him anywhere. After this short lesson, he is ready for the last lesson of the day, leading on foot outside the yard. Take him out around the same obstacles as if you were leading him on horseback. You shouldn't have much trouble at this stage, as he's already had about 6 days of leading around buildings and obstacles, and once the colt is used to it, it becomes old hat. On returning to the yard, let him go for the day.
The whip is a fearsome thing in the hand of the wrong man, so be gentle with it.
Tail pulling and whip breaking whilst mounting. On the 12th day, he is of course put through all the other lessons as usual, the only difference being that in the yard whip cracking and outside foot leading are done first instead of last. After foot leading, the colt has a whip cracking lesson. This time, Ian sits on the horse and cracks the whip. The collar rope is dispensed with, and only the hobbles are retained as the horse gradually gets used to the whip. After the whip cracking, the colt is ready for his ride out. On returning to the yards, unsaddle him, but leave the bridle on, because now he is ready for the 4th lesson of the day, tail pulling. This is also the final collar roping. So it's on with the blindfold, hobbles and collar rope. You'll do well to have a bucket of hot soapy water at hand in which to soak his tail, holding it up on your knee directly behind him and washing the dirt out of his tail. After giving it a good wash, thread it, separate it, and if it has a knot in it, soak it well and work the knot out a few strands at a time. Allow the tail to dry, then make sure the collar rope is on the opposite side to the one you're working. A shearer's comb on a handle makes the best tail puller known. When you consider the tail sufficiently combed out, take off the tip to the length required, just below the hock. After handling the hind feet without the collar rope, the front feet are handled without hobbles. Some horses are natural strikers and are very quick to do so during the first catching. But after having been hobbled, tackled, mouthed, led, ridden, and his hind feet handled, it is rare indeed to find one that will give you any trouble with his front feet.
I was finishing, within a week of being finished at Langlow Downs, and the head manager lived at Listow Downs, 50 miles away. He rang me up and asked me how long before I'd be finished there. I said, 1 week from today. He said, well, give them over to my men out there and go over and do 13 wild horses, old wild horses for Mr. Armstrong at Dave Downs. He said, we can always take them off you a week before you give them to us. I said, no, you can't. Your men are not that good. Well, go over as soon as you can. So I got there at 11:30 at night, a week later. And he came out and said, I'm sorry, Baker, but I've got bad news for you. When I knew you were coming for sure, I took them off the flat country and put them on Stony Ridge. And they broke their feet up into the creek. There's only 6 can be broken in. At 7 are cripples. I said, oh, that's nothing. They'd have to be shod. Oh, they wouldn't do enough work to get quite enough to shoe. I said, I'll catch him, I'll shoot him as soon as I catch him. Oh, you'd never be able to shoot them. No man in the world could. They're big old wild horses. They're all 7 and 8 years old, never had a hand on them. I said, oh, that's nothing. It'll cost you £1 a head to get them shod, and you supply the shoes and the nails. He said you couldn't do it without ropes, and if you put ropes on them, they'd kill themselves. I won't put any ropes on them. Oh, now you don't know what you're talking about, he said. You don't know my horses. I said, yes, I do. I know all horses. And he said, oh, well, I suppose I'd give you a trial. Just before the dinner bell rang, I bridled one, caught one, bridled him, and blindfolded him, and smacked him in the jaw with my open hand. And he threw his head in the air and spun around and got giddy and fell over. So I dived on him and pulled his nose up with my knee in his neck and held him till he stopped struggling. Then I walked away and picked up all his feet. He never moved. He used to go away riding at 9 o'clock every morning and come home. You could set your watch by him. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he'd ride up to my yard. So I shot one after dinner and put him straight and tackled him. The first 6 I put in tackle. They're all running around with their heads tied back. And he said, I see you shot a horsebreaker. Oh, yes, I said. Oh, he was dumbfounded. And he said, did he give you any trouble? I said, none at all. So he went away. Next day he came home, there was another one shot. He said, I see you shot another horsebreaker. Did he give you any trouble? I said, none at all. I don't have trouble with horses, Mr. Armstrong. He said, well, that fellow's mother was the worst kicking, bucking, striking thing of the station ever bred. Oh, no, he's a quiet horse now. If you blindfold a horse both eyes and spin him round fast by smacking him in the jaw with your open hand, he'd get giddy. You blindfold your own self and spin around and you'll fall down. Horse is just the same. You can stand on his ribs and crack a whip on him and he won't get up. And he won't kick you. He can be the worst kicker in the world and he won't lift a foot because he can't see what you're doing. That's how I shot them. I've shot a lot of horses like that.
13th day, leg handling, whip cracking, riding, mounting and dismounting in open. On coming to the 13th day, there will be fewer lessons, it being almost entirely given over to riding, with the exception of a quick picking up of the feet and whip cracking. On saddling the colt, lead him outside the yard and crack the whip around him before mounting. At several intervals during the ride, crack the whip, and in addition, dismount at least twice during the ride. Holding him with one hand, crack the whip around him. Then lead him forward a couple of yards, mount, and continue the ride. On returning from the ride, unsaddle and let him go.
Everything you do with a horse is common sense. Most people don't realise that. They don't work on them long enough to realise it.
14th day, brushing up, final day of breaking, tying up, shoeing and floating. For the tying up lesson, a 6-foot high post is used, with an iron ring slipped over the post. It is important that the iron ring can revolve. If the horse throws himself, his head or neck is held up and cannot come in contact with the ground, thereby avoiding any knockouts or neck injuries. Do not tie up until the horse is thoroughly broken in and quiet to ensure against needless struggles. The reason for the broad strap is that it pulls from further back than the first vertebrae, so taking the strain further back where the neck is more muscled and the vertebrae more heavily covered and stronger, making the risk of injury non-existent. Also, on the colt standing up to the post, the strap immediately loosens and at no time has it any choking effect. After a short tying up lesson, Ian demonstrates the leg roping lesson. Put a hobble strap on the hind foot and attach a rope to the strap. Stand behind him and pull the leg out. It's easier if you have someone to help you. While you pull the leg out, the second person can keep the rope tight. The horse may struggle a little, so keep the rope tight until he stops. And when he's relaxed, slowly release the rope. This will teach him there's no use in struggling, and the only time the rope's released is when he stops fighting it. After leg roping both hind feet and reaching the stage when he will let you handle his feet without any resistance, he is ready for shoeing. At this stage, if the colt has been handled according to instructions, there should be no problem with shoeing, and on completion, the colt is ready for his final lesson. This lesson is, of course, floating. Lead him up to the float, and if he wants to smell the tailboard, which he will before he goes on, let him. Give him a touch with the whip around his hind feet, and it won't be long before he steps away from it. The only time you sting him hard with the whip is when he rears away or runs back from you. If he does run back, go with him. Then lead him up again, remembering to rub his eye at certain intervals to help him relax. It's also important to keep him looking at the float, keeping him faced up to it all the time. Once he goes on, leave him for a few minutes, then walk him off and lead him on again. Repeat this several times until he walks straight on quite happily with no fuss. If you do this properly, he will load anywhere, on anything, anytime you ask. Trailer floats should have a rail each side below the horse's hip, 8 inches from the wall, because if you turn around a corner fast and throw him against the wall, he cannot spread his feet out to enable him to stand up. Some horses get very panicky and climb the wall, ending up on their ribs and kicking the side out of the float. When they cannot spread their feet, even if they don't go down, they become very excited and will rush out backwards as soon as you lower the tailboard, some in a lather of sweat, and they don't want to go back in. Most float builders, even the well-known ones, make no provision to allow a horse to spread his feet and balance himself. At the end of 14 days, the colt has been educated, giving him a good foundation for all he has to know to be a really well-mannered, smart, intelligent, working saddle horse. Here, float loading is demonstrated again, this time using another horse. Thousands of horses never become good loaders because they were taught with wrong methods in the first place, or perhaps were started right, but the lessons were not kept up for it to become a habit. Back hobbles are a great help in this situation.
I've been working with horses all my life. I've studied the Jeffries method of horse breaking for 5 years, and after meeting Jim in 1978, I realised then how much more there was to learn, and I'm still using Jim's methods today because his method works and doesn't just work on one horse, it works on all horses, and I found it to be not only safe for the operator, but also it's safe for the horse. As far as I'm concerned, it's the safest, most efficient way of handling horses.
Yeah, I first met Jim Wilton when I was at a horse breaking exhibition at John Pennell's at Terry Hills, and I was that impressed with his methods that I asked him if I could work with him part-time, which he said yes, and I did for the next 3 years. I worked with Jim, helping him break in horses and train his performing horses, and I then went into business for myself, breaking in horses, and trained several performing horses. And at the moment I've got one very good educated performing mare, Danielle, which I travel around New South Wales and Australia doing exhibitions and demonstrations with. Yeah? And I feel sure that if I hadn't met old Jim and hadn't used his methods and ideas and philosophies, that I would never have got where I have today with horses. You know, I don't think there would have been anyone else in Australia who could have taught me the things that old Jim's taught me.
Well, I first met Jimmy Wilton in about 1965 when I was working for Harry Moyer. Harry Moyer used to break in T.J. Smith's horses at Randwick at Newmarket sale yards. Used to break in about 80 or 90 at a time for Tommy Smith and a couple of other big trainers in Sydney. And when he got overloaded with horses, Harry Moyer, he used to give Jimmy Wilton a ring, and Jimmy Wilton would come out of an afternoon for 3 or 4 hours every day, and he'd help Harry with the mouths of the horses, that's side rein them and things like that, to teach him, train them so you could teach him to steer the horses and everything like that. And I used to watch his methods, his mouthing methods and his breaking in methods, and I purposely used to stay back with him for 3 or 4 hours every day to learn from him. And it's just taught me that Jimmy Wilton's method of breaking in horses with the side rein, that's to mouth the horse, teach him to turn, stop and back and things like that, is one of the safest methods I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of methods all over Australia, and Jim Wilton's, in my opinion, is the best. And through using Jim Wilton's method, I've had quite a lot of good results. I've been doing it for over 20 years now, and I've never had a complaint from a client about a horse's, the way it's been mouthed or handled. Oh, it's the safest method of the lot. It's safer for the horse and safer for the person, like the horse breaker that uses that method. If he's had to practice and learns the method from Jim properly, he will find that he won't knock his horses about, or they won't get distressed or depressed. They'll enjoy the breaking in as much as the breaker is doing it himself. You don't knock yourself around either. It's quite an easy method once you've learned it and had practice at it. Oh, I think the blindfold's really good because you don't need any help when you saddle up a touchy horse or you're trying to put a roller on a touchy horse for the first time. I watched Jim with this blindfold, and he just covers over one eye and the horse will stand there. He can't see him, he can't line him up to kick him or strike him or run away from him because he can't see you to do that, and Jim just moves around quietly. You don't make a noise, and you do that for 2 or 3 days with the horse, and they get used to the feel of everything, and they know you're not going to harm them or hurt them, and they'll stand relaxed for you while you put the gear on or take it off.
I was walking around the stable. I went to Canterbury races, and I was walking around the stables looking at the horses. And I come to a crowd of people, and an old chap with a filly, and he's pushing her head up in the air and trying to lead her forward. All the rest hunting her. And he's saying to the crowd, "Hunt her up." And they'd have tried to hunt her up, and she'd run backwards and rear and one thing and another. They kept this up for quite a while and got nowhere. I'd look at him, and I walked him alongside him and tapped him on the arm. I said, "Give her to me, I'll put her in for you." And he said, "You'll put her in for me." He eyed me up and down from my boots to my bronco hat. He's a mug from the bloody bush, gonna put her in for me. I've been horse breaking for 45 years. Get out of the road, I'm busy. Hunt her up, he said. And I got out of the road. He was busy, busy man. He told the people again to hunt her up. And they hunted her up. She reared over and knocked herself out. Hit the side of her neck on the asphalt. And she was there scratching for a while, trying to get up. She eventually got up, very unsteady on her feet, and I waited a few more moments. She got a bit stronger, and I slipped up alongside of him again. The horse frightened him. He very nearly killed her. I said, give it to me. I'll put her in 1 minute flat. Yeah. And he gave me a dirty look, and he said, I'll see you do it. And he pushed the reins at me, the lead at me. So I took it, and I leaned down low and pulled on a little bit, just light pull on them. They all got behind to hunt her up again. I said, no, you're all in the road, every one of you, clear out. I put one hand over each eye for 1 minute, and I left in the dark for a minute until she forgot about all the hunting up and that. And then I leaned down low and give it a little short tugs on the head lead, and she followed me straight into the barrier, into the stable. Well, he was leading her wrong. He was holding her head high up in the air and saying, hunt her up. And she's running back and all sorts of things. She didn't want to bash her brains out on the crossbar. I leaned down low and just give a little light tugs. And she put her head down and followed me to the stable. She didn't want to bash her brains out, which he was trying to ask her to do. So she reared over on him. And I turned around and when I took her into the stable and I handed him the lead, he's looking at me with his mouth open. And I walked away about 30 yards and I turned around and looked back at him. And everyone there was following me out of sight with their eyes, wondering where the mug come from in the bush. I often wondered if they thought I might have had a clue.